This episode of Navel Gazing is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. Adding a Valley charity to your estate plan creates a lasting legacy that tells future generations what causes matter to you. Your action will inspire others to follow your lead and make a difference. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley community forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Learn more at valleygivesback.org, an initiative of the Valley Community Foundation. Plan now, give later, and impact tomorrow at valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.
Hey Internet, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indies weekly talk show. We're sponsored by valleygivesback.org. Hey, guess what? Teenagers are not a monolith. Republicans are not a monolith. Democrats, not a monolith. Media, not a monolith. Gun owners, law enforcement, not monoliths. I say all this because as of this recording, it is March 14th, 2018, precisely 1 month after the mass murder spree at a high school in Parkland, Florida. This morning at 10 a.m., a national school walkout happened. Ethan Fry and myself covered two very different walkouts at Derby High School and Shelton High School here in the Valley. I emphasize very different because, like teens, Republicans, Democrats, law enforcement, the media, and gun owners, today's walkout was not a monolith. I make that point at the start because we took some heat March 13th because we used a widely used image from womensmarch.com, to which some readers took great exception because they pointed out school groups today were not necessarily advocating for the same things that the organizers behind the Women's March/Women's Youth Empowerment Group are advocating. However, that group was one of the organizing groups behind today's event, according to the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Public Radio, and Vox.com, and at least one of the speakers at the events that Ethan and I attended today. I just wanted to throw that out there because I know there's a significant and deep and troubling distrust of the media out there. There's nothing we can do to change that other than to push back, fight back a little when we get labeled as dishonest. So basically yesterday before the big walkout, and I'm using walkout in air quotes because these were really more organized assemblies.
Yeah.
Right, Ethan? That's Ethan Fry, by the way. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, how are you?
And
it was. There were less. It wasn't like unsanctioned, protests as much as sort of gatherings, I guess.
Yeah, and it seemed to me, at least in the Derby one, the educators, the paid staff there, sort of worked to give students who wanted to express themselves a conduit to do so. This was an assembly, basically, no different than any other assembly I've ever attended at various high schools. But basically, I mean, the day before the event, I reached out. We had people contacting us through social media being like, hey, what's going on this date? Well, what's going to be happening locally? And I'm like, well, we haven't gotten anything, but we haven't asked either. And then we got we didn't actually receive it. In Shelton, the superintendent sent a letter and put it on social media, and we shared it on our page, and the response on our page from Valley Indy Facebook readers was overwhelmingly positive. So I reached out to Carol Merlone and Ansonia. She shared some great details with us, invited us to cover the event. Unfortunately, there's only two of us, so we couldn't get to all the events today. But we heard back from Superintendent Conway up the road from where I am here in Derby. And we heard back from Superintendent Wilson up in Seymour. Now, I wasn't interested, to be honest with you, in staking out a school and watching a bunch of kids hoot and holler and run out of school, like at the end of Dazed and Confused, that Richard Linklater movie from the 90s. In the late 80s, 1980s, I participated in a walkout myself at my high school, and basically my buddy and I had a getaway car stash. We ran off campus, got in the car, and went to go see a movie. That's how much we cared about the actual walkout. But that is not what happened in Derby or Shelton, or as far as I know, in Ansonia today. The educators in those communities clearly tried to make this, and I'll use the cliche, a teachable moment. And again, we didn't have the staff to send someone to Ansonia. I would have loved to observe that one as well. And Seymour opted to keep theirs sort of insular. Basically, we were not given any details on what happened up there. So let's start in Derby, where the 3 students I spoke to were clearly for what they described as quote-unquote sensible gun laws. They also advocated for more mental health intervention and help in general, and for people to just be decent to one another. So after we talk about Derby, we'll go over to you, Ethan, and we'll play some clips from the Shelton quote-unquote walkout, and then we'll revisit Derby, because there's been this discussion in Derby that is happening about possibly, maybe, someday, we don't know, bringing in the National Guard, the Connecticut National Guard, in some capacity for extra eyes or security at Derby High School. So in Derby, there was an 18-minute assembly. Now, sadly and ironically, Derby Middle School, which is across the street from the high school, briefly went into lockdown as this event took place. That was connected to an alleged threat of some kind made on social media against a single individual student within Derby Middle School. So if that doesn't illustrate how times have changed and what's happening in our country, like nothing does. During the planned walkout / assembly at the high school across the street, the middle school went into lockdown very briefly. But let's get it started. This is a clip from Derby High School freshman English teacher Jonathan Mercado. He's introducing this concept to about 60 students who attended the Derby event. There's only about 360 kids in the whole school, and about 60 of them were there in the auditorium. Mercado is also the Valley coordinator for the Human Relations Club in Ansonia, Derby. Here we go.
So we know last month we had a terrible event where 17 young people lost their lives in a high school called Parkland in Florida. Today is the 1-month anniversary of those 17 young people losing their lives. Several of our students came to our administration with the concern that we should become more involved and more aware of what policies and what we can do to help change and alleviate that kind of stress for students coming to school. So we decided to create and align ourselves with a national movement. You guys are one of many right now across this country that are out of their classes and drawing attention to this serious issue.
Now, I didn't capture great audio for the first student speaker. Her name is Amberlyn Angeletti. So not only did I mess up her audio, I also messed up her name. But I did speak to her after. Basically, she wasn't using a mic, and I was in the first row using an iPhone to record this stuff. So it didn't work out. And you had a kind of a similar problem in Shelton with the wind. I mean, unfortunately, we're not audio engineers. But here's Xavier Ibrahim. He's a junior at Derby High School. And he basically says students shouldn't have to be worried about getting killed in school. And he also calls for tougher gun laws. Basically, he said it should be tougher to get what he described as assault rifles. So here is Xavier.
And I want to let everybody know that I am heartbroken and deeply saddened about the school shootings that have been occurring in the U.S. This has become a new norm, common to the point that we have become desensitized to it. How would you feel if you were the parent who got a call about their son or daughter being killed at school in cold blood? How would you feel if you knew a beloved teacher that was killed at a school shooting? I wonder why these things continue to happen, these shootings. Why are our own killing our own? Why aren't these people being stopped? Who do we blame for this? Is it mental illness or the lack of love between communities? Or is it the gun laws? If the process of getting your driver's license is so complex, why can't this be the same for acquiring an assault rifle or any gun at that matter? These laws need to be changed, and this nonsense has to be stopped immediately. School is supposed to be a place of safety and education, but now parents and students and teachers have to worry about making it home to their families alive? People are being killed senselessly. We need solutions, not problems. I want change. Change for sensible gun laws, change in how we treat one another, change to reduce school shootings to literally none at all. I can't do this alone. It's up to us, the students, the teachers, and the parents.
Also at the Derby event, and that was again Xavier Ibrahim in a quick audio clip there, Mr. Mercado provided information to the students who wanted to continue to make their voices known. Basically, he said, hey, if you agree or support what these two student speakers have said, here's a way to channel that energy into something other than just, being on Twitter or yelling out your front door. There was also, I should note, in Derby, a opportunity for any of the students who attended this 17-minute assembly connected to the national walkout to share their opinions. If somebody said, this is garbage and we don't support any type of tougher gun laws, there was that chance to do that. No one took that opportunity up. Just for the records, for the record, the kids were very well behaved. There was no hooting and hollering. They were respectful, and they all politely applauded the two speakers. But no one else spoke other than Xavier and Amber Lynn. So here's, again, Mr. Mercado basically explaining how to formally make your voice known in American politics. And just another note there, like I said, there are about 50 to 60 kids in the auditorium. There's 360 kids in the whole school. Of the kids in the auditorium, I counted about 20 of them, according to a show of hands, that were 18 years old, which makes them eligible to vote. There was also an opportunity, if they wanted to register right there and then. There were a bunch of iPads with internet access set up.
And holding this kind of forum is wonderful. But in the end, after you leave these halls, and if you don't do anything about it, it's just that. We held a nice little meeting with many students who have common ideas, but did nothing about it. All right? So what I've compiled up on this table are a list of many, many senators and House of Representative folks that make our laws. All right? I have one list containing the Senate members of Connecticut. Another list containing the House members of Connecticut. Another packet here that contains another date, that March 24th, that we're going to have a more nationwide. There's a March on Washington, which I'm sure you guys have heard of. But there are also local options. Shelton, Old Saybrook, Hartford are all doing something on that day. So I have compiled a list, it's a couple pages long, where you can actually look on and decide to attend. There's also a list of senators who decided to say no to common sense gun laws. My advice to you guys is, if you really feel passionate about this, is that you take those email addresses, you take those names, and you spam them as much as you can.
Okay, in terms of themes, I listened to the audio that you captured at your Shelton event, and I just was struck by the fact that the kids were all basically saying, we should feel safe in our schools. Obviously, school shootings must stop, and we are sort of in this upside-down world where we've become sort of desensitized maybe to violence, and that school shootings are becoming this way of life, which is bizarre. And speaking to that point, was that sort of, is that accurate? Is that sort of what you got? I mean, we'll go on to Shelton after we play one more.
And like, I'm listening to one of the clips, I'm forgetting exactly which one, but you had mentioned to the person that, as you said, you went to high school in the 80s. And I remember I was in high school when Columbine happened. And like, that was just like so shocking and like unheard of, that the next like several days in school, all of our classes, we didn't talk about whatever the lesson plan was or whatever. We just talked about that, and we had these conversations in our classrooms amongst ourselves. And that's going on, it seems, every 2 years now for kids going to school now who weren't even alive when Columbine happened. So
and that's actually, it's our next clip where that is brought up. I went to a high school and there was a homicide. A student murdered a woman on our high school track when I was a freshman, the first couple of weeks of school. And it's just bizarre to me to think, that was just a normal murder. It wasn't a mass murder. Like, it's just all becomes sort of crazy. But here is Amber Lynn, a Derby High School student, again, making the point, whether you like it or not, she is advocating or suggesting that more has to be done with gun laws. So here's Amber Lynn.
Something that my friend told me that I think is really true. She said that our generation kind of grew up in this, and something that my mom said is we were born in this, because Columbine happened in 1999, and one of us was born in 1999 to 200. So we got used to this stuff happening, and we can't get used to it. We need to put a stop to it. We need to go to Congress and tell them that we need to put a stop to school shooting. We need to make guns harder to get, as Dick's Sporting Goods did. They made it really hard for people to get guns there. So we want something to stop the school shooting, to stop the school violence, because people here, we feel safe, but just because we feel safe doesn't mean something bad can't happen here.
Okay, and then sort of anticipating how some of the Derby comments might play, at least on our Facebook page. There are the Valley, I think, at least if you look at our Facebook page. And again, nothing is monolithic. But the Second Amendment, gun owners, very strong block. It's part of life, I think, to some extent in the lower Naugatuck Valley. There are very, when you start throwing, I know when I almost hesitated before putting our story about all these walkouts on social media, because it's one of those things that just it's like sticking your finger in an electrical socket at least on our Facebook page, where people are like, wow. So I asked Derby Superintendent Matthew Conway, again, because I'm anticipating some people are going to be offended by the fact these students were allowed to advocate for stricter gun laws within the school building, within the school walls. How does he balance the emotion and politics of these big ticket controversial issues? I guess wouldn't have been easier to sort of push this away, or at least say, no, we're going to do this privately, media, you can't come in. So here is Derby School Superintendent Matthew Conway on the politics of all this. And then later we're going to have a clip from Conway, a little 5-minute interview where we talk about whether it's feasible or smart to bring in the Connecticut National Guard as extra school security at Derby High School.
There's so much emotion and difference of opinion, and on the issue of gun control, or even this issue. We put an image of one of the groups that helped organize this and made it known, and we were accused of, well, you want to take our guns, you're liberal. There's sort of all this comes to the table. As the head of a school district and sort of organizing this, or allowing the students to organize this, how do you balance this issue and all the different sort of concerns or baggage or political views that exist out there over this particular...
Our role in our schools, Eugene, is to prepare our kids to be adults. And so what better opportunity than to do that in an environment where we can provide support for that practice to occur. So regardless of one's views on a particular identified issue, it's more about providing opportunity for coaching and support for an experience they are going to continue to experience as adults. And that is an opportunity to express your opinion in a very constructive way, and recognizing that there are multiple opinions out there about any one issue. So our role, we thought, in a responsible way, allowing students to practice that That's our and prepare them for adulthood. And this is just part of that process. So as much as we prepare them in academics, we need to prepare them for these type activities as well.
Hi, this is Eugene Driscoll, most likely interrupting myself to bring you a message from our sponsor, valleygivesback.org. Adding a Valley charity to your estate plan creates a lasting legacy that tells future generations what causes mattered to you. Your action will inspire others to follow your lead and make a difference. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley community forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Learn more at valleygivesback.org, an initiative of the Valley Community Foundation. Plan now, give later, impact tomorrow at valleygivesback.org. All right, moving on to Shelton High School. This was, Ethan Fry, I think a more subdued event, at least in terms of policies that were advocated by the student speakers. Is that correct, Ethan? What'd you see and hear there? What did it feel like?
Yeah, and I guess first of all, you talked about when we share these things and the comments we get. I was surprised a little in terms of the comments we got yesterday, because we had shared Dr. Christopher Clouet, the Shelton superintendent. He wrote a letter, or posted and shared on social media, a letter about this walkout event, in which he didn't come to any policy conclusions or anything. It was just sort of a thoughtful letter saying, we have to ask the question why, essentially, when all these school shootings happened. And I thought that we might get there might be some negative backlash to that, but from what I saw, it was universally positive, the reaction on our Facebook page. So that was sort of heartening to see. And then that's what made me a little surprised when we basically just advised people that these things were happening the next day to see a sort of a backlash. But maybe that was
on me, because I used that image from the Women's March thing, I just thought it was accepted that whether you like it or not, they are one of the major groups that are all playing a major
this day. Yeah.
They're all playing a major part. That's why all these things happened on this particular day. But I understand that, people. I did go back and then that post, and I just put up a thing saying, please read the article before commenting. Just don't react to an image you're seeing in our. And I did add a cut line after Liza Whitehead pointed out that these things aren't necessarily connected. But at that point, you couldn't really say they were not, because the Derby one actually was. Although it was not listed on a website. But anyway, I should read. Let's before we talk to you about the Shelton walkout, I'll just read some of the comments that were sort of against this whole issue, just I guess in the interest of fairness, so it's not just us blabbing on. But someone named Bill and Bev Hanna, they've just posted someone else's something from Twitter, an image from Educating Liberals. A week ago, Congress was asking Tide to change their pod designs so teenagers would stop eating them. Now, this week, the media thinks teenagers should determine gun control laws. It's always interesting to me when the media it's just the media. But then Tony Mamone said, suspend those that walk out. Actions have consequences. Teach them a lesson about being accountable. Leo P. Moscato Jr., go to class where you belong. Don Anthony Ozzie, and these are just usernames on Facebook. Why are 7th and 8th grade kids participating in a walkout or have a say in gun control? Joe Teodoso. Kids who were eating Tide Pods last week now think they're experts on policy and the Bill of Rights. John Awalt, all they want is out of school. # get real. James McCluskey, this was something that came up several times. Instead of a walk out, and this is a meme he posted, or an image he posted, walk up, not out. And the idea there was, instead of walking out of school on March 14th, encourage students to walk up to the kid who sits alone at lunch and invite them to sit with your group. Walk up to the kid who sits quietly in the corner of the room and sit next to her. Smile and say hi. Walk up to the kid who causes disturbances in class and ask how he's doing. Walk up to your teachers. Thank them. Walk up to someone who has different views than you. Get to know them. You may be surprised at how much you have in common. Build on that foundation instead of casting stones. I challenge students to find 14 students and 3 adults to walk up to and say something nice in honor of those who died in Florida on the 14th of March. But you can start practicing now. And that was James McCluskey. And I would point out that in Derby, the kids that I spoke to, they said, yeah, that's part of it. We need to be decent human beings.
Practice that every day. Why not? You know?
That's not something that has to be done just on the anniversaries of mass murder, I think. But that's a real, there's a concern. I mean, bullying and just being, anyway. What else is there? Let me just see. There's a couple others. There's one more I wanted to see here. Again, Joe Teodoso. Oh, I just realized this is from 2 hours ago, and you cursed. Why do people have to curse on? I don't understand that. How people can. Anyway, walking out is about as useful as people who change their profile image to a flag that suffered a terrorist attack. Quote, I'm helping. Maybe kids should quit being bullies and little expletive deleted bags to other students and accept them no matter what. I mean, obviously, these are people commenting who didn't attend today's events, and some of these are people who were anticipating that this would be, chaos and that the media would distort this all, and my computer stopped working. So that was people on Facebook weighing in prior to this event and prior to the publishing of this podcast, obviously. So finally, I'm sorry to blab on and on and on and on and really not giving Ethan much of an opportunity to say anything. What was going on in Shelton? You had, first of all, 300 people?
Yeah, the student council organized by design, pretty much an explicitly non-political event. About 300 students walked out of the school and gathered in front of the main doors for 17 minutes, 1 minute for each of the victims. This was during an advisory period, so those who didn't want to take part remained indoors with teachers. I'm not sure how many students are in the high school, but 300, pretty sizable number to have gathered out there. They observed a minute's silence for each victim. As each victim of last month's shooting name was read, there was a minute's silence, and a person would place a flower in a vase in that victim's memory. Afterward, many of the students signed a banner that will be sent to the Florida school today in a show of solidarity. They observed the moments of silence impeccably. Police and school administrators helped plan the event. And they were present, but they didn't speak, and afterward deferred to the students who took the lead in organizing it. I spoke with Alexis Klimaszewski. She's the senior and the president of the student council afterward. And she repeated that the purpose of the event was as a memorial to the people killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, and not to express support officially as a student council for any one solution or the other, or any set of policy recommendations. But she said personally,
let's let her.
Yeah.
Because we have a clip from her, and I think there's 2 clips here. There's one that was labeled student council. Was that what she said formally to the crowd gathered, or are both these clips with you talking?
That was right afterward. Me and another reporter from the Shelton Herald. She basically read a statement on behalf of the student council, and then after that, I was able to pull her aside for a minute.
Oh, gotcha.
Before they returned.
So here's Alexis talking or reading a statement prepared in advance to distribute to the media. Here we go.
So we wanted our students to have the opportunity to participate in this national walkout, but as a school, we decided rather than making a political statement to instead honor the lives affected by this tragedy, which is in fact the first step in leading to a safer society.
I was wondering, it's obviously a tough time to take a stand, but why did you guys feel so important to come together and make a statement?
I think that as students at this school, we've grown up surrounded by too much, particularly seeing all the tragedies in schools. We live so close to Sandy Hook, and now this, which affected students just like us in high school. So.
Okay, so then, Ethan, we're saying that after Alexis read that statement, I know Aaron Berkowitz from the Shelton Herald asked a few questions. We edited down. We've edited all these down. These are not complete clips from these two events that we attended. But then you asked her basically, what do you think the problem is? Why are there so many school shootings, and what has to happen to stop it? Is that correct? So
yeah.
Here is Alexis fielding a question from Valley Indy reporter Ethan Fry.
The superintendent shared that letter Monday, asking the question, why does this keep happening? As a senior in high school, do you have any, could you answer that question or begin to answer it? I mean, is it just an unknown?
I don't think I can answer that question totally, obviously, but I think that, I don't want to say anything political. I think that we need to strive to making our society safer as a whole, whatever needs to be done to do that, whether it's, the mental health issue, whether it is gun laws, whatever we can do, because the ultimate goal is students should not feel unsafe in school. I shouldn't feel unsafe going into college. So I think that all of our leaders, all of our adults should work together to try to figure that out.
And what I found interesting about the response there from Alexis is that, first of all, it's very hard to, especially when you're that young. I could have never have done any of this when I was 16, 17, even 18, even 25 probably. Yeah. But she hesitates a little, and I don't blame her given what happens. And I mean, these kids are way into social media much more than even you and I, even though we work for an online newspaper. And man, it's a lot of times it's not worth putting your neck out there, I think, because of all just the hate that comes your way. So she did a very good job saying, here, I made my statement, and of course you're going to ask me another question. Here's how I'm going to answer it. But basically, I was impressed by the fact that she also just kind of said, hey, adults, just do something. Just get together and do something. And that was another theme we heard today, instead of, attacking each other with memes and whatever, MSNBC versus Fox News versus Breitbart versus mainstream media, maybe just do something. And I don't know, maybe that's my opinion creeping in there, but I don't know. That was what happened in Derby and Shelton today during the National Student Walkout.
And I wanted to mention, that Shelton event was non-political. 3 students from Shelton High School, Julia Meyer, Angela Kamara, and Tyler Macias, they're also involved in another event scheduled for March 24th called the Shelton March for Our Lives. That's going to be Saturday, March 24th at 12:30 p.m. at Veterans Memorial Park. And for more information on that, you could just search Facebook for Shelton March for Our Lives. And that is a little more, they'll do a rally with speakers and then march past City Hall, it says on Facebook. So
okay, so as all this has been happening after the Parkland massacre a month ago, there were a series of school forums. Shelton had a school safety forum, and Sonia had a school safety forum. Derby had a school safety forum. I made it a point not to attend these. I thought it was. I thought schools would keep us away from the school safety forum, because that's where the police department would get in there and talk about security, and that's something. By law, you're allowed to do that as a public body in an executive session type thing. So, we don't look to publicize security. So I didn't tell Ethan to go, and we didn't cover any of them. And also, a lot of, from what I read in the Register, like the Derby one, they sort of re-emphasized security grants they got after Sandy Hook, because what often happens after a bunch of high school students or young people are murdered in a public setting or within a public institution, federal grant money comes down to improve school security and safety. But one of the things that the New Haven Register reported, they had a reporter go to the Derby Forum, was this idea, and it was sort of mentioned deep into the story, that maybe the Connecticut National Guard, or the National Guard based in Connecticut, can come into Derby to do something in some capacity to help improve safety. So I took the opportunity today to grab Dr. Conway, who was at Derby High School during the walkout/assembly, to talk a little more about what he may have in mind. So here is Dr. Conway. This is about, I guess it's about 5 minutes, 5-minute clip.
So is that accurate? Is it sort of a plan at this point to bring in the National Guard in some capacity to help with school security and safety?
So as I did have a slide on it and mentioned at the security forum, we are in infancy stages with simply an idea that was brought to me by somebody else outside of schools. Have we ever considered partnering with the National Guard to have a presence in schools? And so that led to myself reaching out to Major General Martin, who's the chief of the National Guard here in Connecticut, and also the most senior chief in the country for National Guard, to open up a dialogue about what that might look like. So while they might have individuals in offices today throughout our state in a recruitment capacity, for example, who come into our schools annually as part of recruitment to the National Guard, is there an opportunity where those offices might be located in a school building where they can provide an additional set of eyes for the schools, at the same time completing their duties for the National Guard as a recruiter. So that led to him sharing the idea with his senior team, as well as with Governor Malloy, in terms of, is this something that the National Guard and the governor's office would entertain looking at possibilities of this, and would we be willing to look at a possible pilot of some type in Derby, for example, to see if this is even feasible or something that makes sense for anybody. So that's the stage we're at now. We are.
So it's still in that. It's not like it's been stopped and the governor said no. We're not
no,
gonna do
actually,
that,
they were supportive, and that, again, realizing that this is a local decision, but that they are supportive of the idea. If this is something that the local board would like to discuss. So
and then just to help me understand, so it would be more like the National Guard could conceivably one day, possibly maybe, have an office in the school district where they work on recruiting and sort of a patrol capacity of some kind, or
it could be dependent upon what the capacity and the needs are. It could be simply watching cameras and then reporting out to our climate specialists, which we already have in our buildings, what they might see going on the cameras, so that we can more efficiently and quickly respond to different areas. So we have cameras, for example, down at Chatfield. But if somebody's not watching those cameras, a car that enters the campus is all the way up on campus before anybody may know about it. So simple things like that, of eyes on cameras that we currently have many of, to more quickly report what's going on in our buildings.
Do you know,
and our perimeter.
Would there be any cost assassociated with that? Would you have to pay the
we
National
haven't
Guard? That's all.
Discussed that. That's all, again, very infancy stages right now, and scheduling a follow-up meeting to discuss what it might look like, so that I have something to present to our board.
All right, so again, that was Derby Superintendent Matthew Conway talking about an idea to possibly bring the National Guard into Derby High School as an extra pair of eyes to bolster security. Still very much in the infancy stages, as he said a few times there. A few weeks back, we had Jim Gilday on our podcast. He was talking about the Waterbury branch line and the train problems, or the lack of money, or the potential lack of funds and service reductions and fare hikes that are coming to Connecticut trains. But he's also Gilday is also the chairman of the Derby Board of Education. So we asked him very quickly, this was a few weeks back, what his position or his board's position is on the idea of the National Guard coming to Derby High School. I read it had been proposed in California after Sandy Hook, where I guess Barbara Boxer out there had said, let's get the National Guard to do desk work for the cops and we'll have more cops in schools. But I don't think it ever went anywhere. And then a state lawmaker or congressman in Georgia just in the last week or so wants to do it down there. He said it's at least worth having the conversation. So all that being said, has the Board of Education in Derby talked about this at all, or and what are your thoughts on it?
The Board of Education has not had a discussion on the potential integration of the National Guard in the schools. It was certainly an idea that the superintendent broached at a community forum. So I think there are certainly further discussions the board will have. Our school safety subcommittee will start to work with the administration and just reviewing our crisis situations, our security protocols, and I'm certain that'll be a topic of discussion.
That pretty much wraps it up for this very special edition of Navel Gazing, the Valley Indies Weekly Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Valley Indy, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com Valley Independent Sentinel. This podcast is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Libsyn, and we are played every Monday at, and this is a time change, 10 p.m. on 103.5 FM, New Haven's community radio station, WNHH. We get moved around a lot. We're like Arrested Development on Fox back in the day. You know what I mean? Ethan, are you still there?
Yeah, that's like the, we're like the Tom Snyder of community radio in New Haven. Get your color teenies ready.
Well, I meant by the fact that we were on at, I think we started at noon.
Yeah.
We were 1 p.m.
It's like the late night shift. Man.
Right. We could start cursing. It's okay. Hey, we should just, the next one of these we'll do, it'll be foul-mouthed and intoxicated. I'm just kidding, people. But if you don't laugh, you'll cry, especially with the subject matter that we're talking about today. Because I mean, the whole thing, the fact that we're having these discussions about school shootings is just so deeply troubling and sad. And I certainly don't have any answers. And I agree with anybody for 5 minutes. If you want to accuse me of liberal bias, I believe I have no idea. This is way above my pay grade to figure out. But the only thing I can say is put on my rose-colored glasses and at least say, hey, God bless America. We can have this discussion. At least we live in a place where we can disagree with each other without
civilly.
Yeah. But anyway, is there anything else you wanted to add, Ethan?
No, I think that was well put.
All right. For Ethan Fry, I'm Eugene Driscoll. We'll talk to you next time on Navel Gazing.
Hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day.